Vale. Bueno, buena tarde.
Good afternoon. Welcome to every one of you. Welcome to Calalia. For translation purposes, I was asked to speak in Spanish. So, good afternoon and welcome to Calalia. I repeat myself in Spanish. This is the site of Habitat, which is the City Council of Barcelona institution where we are boosting urban innovation. It is not only a great space, but it is also a great facility. It's a public facility. Thus, it is important to welcome you all with this. Maybe you came here to talk about algorithms, or maybe you are here because you want to protect yourself from the heat that we are suffering outside, taking advantage of the air condition that we have here in this facility. This is a public facility. You can take advantage of all the facilities here, and we have several seminars, projects, and we are delighted to count with all of those that want to work towards urban innovation and also to work for a better and a positive impact in the Barcelona area. So beyond today's session, if you want to know what's our foundation and the role that we play, and also if you want to have a look to these amazing new facilities, you will more than welcome. I don't want to talk too much because we are late, and I'd like to thank you all. Thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you to the setup, not only for organizing this seminar, but also for the amazing work that they are implementing, which is an excuse for today's sessions. Today we are showing and presenting the Global Observatory of Urban Artificial Intelligence, which is under the sponsorship of different setup teams. It is an observatory that belongs to one of the main strategies amongst the 20 actions set by the municipality of Barcelona related with AI. So it's a great starting point of an action that will offer some content to this strategy. Today we are starting a series of conferences, and last Monday, we opened the headquarters because it's going to be the headquarters for United Nations and UNICEF E2 in order to reduce the digital gap and also to be able to get internet in all world schools. And this week we'll carry on with this presentation. So it's a great week for Habitat, and after these amazing news, which are not very frequent lately, it is a pleasure to be with you. We are aware that the heat is very, very heavy right now and doesn't make people to come. However, I think that we have quite a great, interesting seminar. I'll be speaking later. So we will have a great seminar with great speakers. So it's going to be a pleasure. We will try to compensate the summer heat with some intellectual fresh air. Thanks to the next presentations. I'd like to give the floor to Paul Morillas, Director of CDEP. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for being amongst us today. Thank you for your presence and also for your participation. And thank you very much to those who are following this conference online in this hybrid event. So on-site, live, and online event. Yes, you're right, Michael. It is a great pleasure to be with you because we are witnessing that we are experiencing quite a recent initiative through all different standards in innovation. The program of global cities that comes with the support of the Barcelona City Council makes us to be better positioned and to face the role that cities can play in the international arena, and how can cities can contribute not only to be bigger actors and the most relevant stakeholders for change in the international order, and also how we can offer some solutions and how can they be the starting point for several discussions that eventually will go beyond the local environments and the city environments in order to offer to the international community bigger ability and several actions. Beyond all the actions, we should talk about the technology and the climate transition, which is a fundamental element for cities. Barcelona is working very hard with this regard. You mentioned two previous initiatives that really show in a very efficient manner the role that you played, but from CIDOB, from this observatory that we have in CIDOB, it's just a very small contribution for this major goal. And after the beginning, since July 2021, of all the works, for more than 1 year, we are working in this sense, and we are trying to implement this Urban Artificial Intelligence Global Observatory. I think that we are contributing towards a fundamental discussion. It has to do with the awareness that the AI has on our daily life, in our cities, but beyond. But also we need to offer to these functioning working frameworks where AI plays a very important role. We need to allocate some ethical components, legal components, and political features that will help for this transition, for this bigger presence of digital role, and the AI must be guided with some purposes towards the common good, a shared common good, mainly where we are more exposed to these events, and cities are a clear example of this. So to us, it is very important to contribute with this regard. As in Center for International Research, International Relationships, it is important, it makes sense. And we are doing with benchmarking exercises. We are also looking towards other cities, what cities are doing. We will have some representations of other cities working in this direction as well, but always ambitioning, I do insist with this idea, that the discussion should not be among cities. So we must be able to create some conditions and to have an impact on global agendas, on international agendas and state agendas, and cooperation agendas, as well as many other stakeholders playing in the international field that should say and contribute. So this is a tiny contribution, and I must deeply be thankful to the Barcelona City Council from CIDOB, but also from our program. I think that the best thing it is to start our discussion. I think you're staying here, but I leave the stage and I'll give the floor to Marta Galceran. She's a researcher of the program Global Cities. She's behind the curtains of these amazing initiatives, and she will be following a new way, and it's going to channel all these strategies. Maybe you will be here. Marta, you have the floor. We do apologize, but the mic is not on.
¿No? Falta a mí. No sé.
Maybe won't be here, sorry. Yes, now, is it working now, my microphone? Good afternoon, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you properly. I'm going to speak into English.
Two of our panelists today come from Amsterdam, so continue this session in English. So as Paul was mentioning, the Global Observatory on Urban Artificial Intelligence is a project that we launched with the collaboration of Barcelona City Council, also with the cities of Amsterdam, London, and the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights. Is a project that has particular products that we associate with that. We last year we helped to develop a framework on what exactly we need to when we speak about artificial intelligence, ethical artificial intelligence, what exactly are we talking about? This might seem like an obvious question, but it's not that much. Actually, there's even divergences in how the public sector or the private sector or even the citizens understand what is an ethical artificial intelligence. So finding a common ground was important. And then we also realized that perhaps we lack experiences. We lack like specific examples developed by cities that help us illustrate what is this new emerging field of urban artificial intelligence. So it's with this spirit that we came up with the idea of an atlas of urban artificial intelligence that we are launching today. It's a product that aims to fulfill at least 3 roles. First, building a repository of experiences developed by cities worldwide that help us precisely to get some inspiration on what is a project taking into consideration the ethical dimensions of artificial intelligence. I want to remark here that this is a project, it's an initiative like unique. We know that there are other atlases, there are other initiatives seeking to track artificial intelligence projects, but not with this particular digital rights and ethical dimension. This is something unique. We also thought that it was important to track the evolution of this field, so it's an ongoing project. We are launching it today with an atlas featuring 35 cities and 108 projects, but this is something that we expect to grow in the coming months. So spread the word and help us doing that. Showcasing based case studies, also showing, like, tracking the evolution of artificial intelligence in this field, and also inspiring, right, a variety of actors, private sector, cities, citizens that want to monitor what their governments are doing, to get a better understanding of what artificial intelligence with an ethical lenses mean. So with that, we launch this first version of the atlas. As I mentioned, it's something ongoing, but we already have some very, very preliminary conclusions on where are we today. If I can get the next slide, because I'm not sure it's, okay. So here you can get some hints on how the atlas looks like, right? So what I was mentioning, we have already some very preliminary conclusions that we want to share with you. For instance, in terms of geographical localization, where are most projects being developed today, applying ethical lenses to urban artificial intelligence? Well, we see a disproportionate amount of projects and cities from Europe and Central Asia, also some of North America. So I would say this is still something quite of the global north, right? More conclusions. In which sectors are we deploying, are we developing such projects? Clearly, governance and urban services gets the bulk of the projects. We have almost half of them within this particular field, but also followed by social services, the environment, mobility, and to a lesser extent, security and resilience, infrastructures, and economy. The interesting thing is this is the picture today. Let's see how this evolves in the future. My hint is probably that mobility and environment will probably be some fields to look after in the coming years. But this is the picture today with the projects we have in the atlas. Also by type, we have that 80% of the initiatives that we've been able to map are projects, 15% are policies, and 6% are strategies. What is the conclusion out of this figure? Well, sometimes, and this is something that happens also in other fields, we start by projects, right? We start by initiatives that are perhaps unconnected. Perhaps they are developed by different departments within the municipal institution, but it eventually becomes something more institutional, something more of a policy priority for the city council, and it can eventually become a strategy. So this is the picture today. Also interesting, almost half of them are fully implemented, so this is not wishful thinking, right? What we are seeing, or what you will be able to see in the Atlas is something, there are projects that are working, and most of them, they're working fairly well. So also another message to take back home. And finally, you will also see that among the projects that we have, when we track it by the principles that define what an ethical use of artificial intelligence means, which are accountability, sustainability, privacy protection, safety and security, transparency and openness, and fairness and non-discrimination. The bulk of the projects fall within the categories of transparency and openness, and fairness and non-discrimination. Again, let's see if this is something that will evolve into the future. Again, my hint is probably that sustainability will get more attention in the future. So before entering into the panel and asking our panelists to dive deeper into what actually is artificial intelligence, what actually are they developing in their cities, I just wanted to provide some examples of some of the projects that you'll be able to see in the Atlas. For instance, we have a couple of strategies, one from Barcelona City Council that I'm sure that Michael will probably talk about. We also have a strategy by New York, by the city of New York, which you can see here, it's a strategy on artificial intelligence, but it has some ethical dimension. Also, you will be able to see an II register, so this tool that allows citizens to track how their governments are making their decisions using algorithms. So this is an initiative being pushed by Helsinki, but also by the city of Amsterdam that we'll have today in the panel. So perhaps Lydia will be able to explain us a little bit more on that. We also have one project, for instance, from the city of Los Angeles that is applying artificial intelligence to get a better understanding of urban air quality, something that, of course, is of greater concerns for many cities around the world, something that is even expected to grow in importance in the future. So we have the city of Los Angeles. Actually, they are doing that through a partnership with the private sector and also knowledge institutions. So partnerships are also really important in the development of most of those projects, and that's another conclusions that we saw from the Atlas. Another example, for instance, from the City of London, who is using artificial intelligence to address, to sort of like make predictions on the possibility of that someone end up becoming homeless. This is another project. And finally, one from the City of Buenos Aires, which is a chatbot. Chatbot is a very simple tool that most cities, or many cities have. Sometimes we are not aware that there is also artificial intelligence behind this chatbot, that maybe we can also question how the decisions are being made, and when the chatbot answers to the questions that the citizens address to their governments. So with this first overview of what we are presenting today, I call our third panelist on stage. Okay, thank you. So the aim today is I want you to go back home with two main aims. First, getting a better understanding of what is ethical artificial intelligence, what principles should be considered when we discuss the ethical dimension of artificial intelligence, and get some practical knowledge in terms of what projects leading cities are developing around the world, but also what limitations, what challenges come with the development of those projects. With that, I go to our first panelist, who is joining today from Amsterdam, is Milo Jansen, who is the coordinator of the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights. Hello, Milo. Can you hear us well?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you. Hello.
Hi, Milo. So the first question, let's start by the basics, right? So what is an ethical artificial intelligence? What principles should inspire any project that wishes to label itself as ethical? Perhaps you could help us here, Milo?
Yeah, I will share some reflections based on the principles that we also try to promote via the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights, which is in very short so that everyone knows. It's a coalition of 50 cities founded by the cities of Barcelona, Amsterdam, and New York. And all these cities unite in the promotion of human-first digitalization in their cities, so digital rights policy making and advocacy. And what I would like to highlight first is maybe the expression by now is commonly known by most of you, that technology is not something that develops naturally. It doesn't grow. It doesn't just happen. No, it's created, shaped, and used by us every day. And so also artificial intelligence takes shape based on the narratives, the visions, and the values that we hold and that we share and that we express together. So the five principles that we have within the Coalition for Digital Rights, they are created to emphasize that technology should first of all work for the people and for the democratic values that we hold as city societies. And if we ask our city members, what kind of city do you want to be? They will emphasize that digitalization should first of all work for the community and for the public good. This requires cities to move away from a narrative that promotes a purely data-driven and a purely technology-driven city that aims to optimize for effectiveness. But the requirements for a narrative based on ethics include the principles such as inclusion and fairness, public participation, accountability and transparency. And these are the values that we aim to promote as a collective globally, but also within our cities and in the policies that we have around AI. Since AI systems, like narratives, they should be understood as, not be understood as straightforward reflections of the city that we live in. AI systems are value-laden and they represent only parts of our cities and parts of our realities. So they do provide useful insights for governments to understand and interact with what happens in their cities. It's useful for delivering a wide range of city services, but they do constantly require an active judgment on how are they actually contributing to the life of the people in these cities. And they should manifest and promote a balance of maximizing the social benefits, but also not causing potential harms on the people living in our cities and using these services. And we believe that digital rights can guide such a balance to again and again reflect and weigh, okay, how, which values do we want to see reflected in these cities and in our systems, and yeah, digital rights provide a good guideline for those values. And the final thing that I would like to add is that for this balance can change over time. As was already mentioned, sustainability might be a value that is not included right now in the coalition principles, but should be included over time because we can see in the public debate that this is also something that requires an ethical lens. So active reflection and active debates seem essential to the promotion of ethical AI. Thank you.
Ahora. No. Thank you, Milou.
Well, there's also a lot of technology involved here on all fronts.
It works, yeah. Okay. Well, Milo, thank you. So let's now move to practical, like to projects on the ground. We have here today with me on stage Michael Donaldson from the city of Barcelona, Lydia Prinsen from the city of Amsterdam. So we find many projects from Amsterdam and from Barcelona on the Atlas, and I want you to highlight perhaps 2 of them that you think that are interesting, perhaps because they are more innovative than other projects that cities around the world are doing, perhaps they are more impactful. So pick 2, summarize them.
Go ahead, Lydia.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for giving the floor and having the input. I think first of all, it's nice to give a bit of background information on how we designed and why we developed it.
Just a second, because I think it's not on.
Okay. That's a very loud introduction. Hi. I think it's nice to give a bit of background in how those projects, I want to highlight the algorithm register and the procurement clauses for artificial intelligence. Amsterdam is a technology-minded city, and we like to use technology in a secure and responsible manner. And that's reflected in the fact we have a deputy mayor who holds a portfolio that's focused on ICT and the digital city, but also by being one of the founding members of the coalition. And besides that, there were already a lot of abstract guidelines on how to use ethics, but we said actually to put it in practice, we have to design something that makes that we can be open and transparent about the algorithms we use. And that's how, together with Helsinki, we started to design a prototype for the algorithm register, who gives the citizens, companies, people in Amsterdam an insight in the processes we have as a city and where algorithms are used and how they impact the decisions we make. And I think it's worth addressing and highlighting this project because it gives an insight and it makes that a citizen is able to understand by the way how we describe the use of the algorithm to actually know how it impacts that person, but also to use the information that's in the register to go in objection to a decision we have made. So that's the first one.
Right. So I take it over. Yeah. To be honest, it's not that we've got thousands of projects or either policies on AI, because as AI is not really an emergent technology because it's been going on for the last 50 years, it is true to say that that the impact it's having now in our cities, in our society, is much higher than when it started, and that kind of it is kind of a responsibility of our of public administration, how to tackle, how to use use all the potential that AI gives us. So in that sense, we have approached the use of this technology from 2 sides. First of all, how to shift from a reactive administration to a proactive administration through the use of algorithms and data, the combination of AI and big data. I'll put an example on that. And the other approach we have, it's the way it's written down in our strategy, is how to guarantee this ethical dimension. This, well, might not be totally correct. We were having this discussion over dinner, whether it's an ethical dimension or the protection of different rights, digital rights, and especially fighting against no discrimination. So this would be basically the 2 goals that we want to deploy on our strategy. Let me put an example for the first of them all, which would be this idea from a reactive administration to a proactive administration. We know as a fact that over 30% of the subsides, the economic subsides, at the European level are lost because the people who are potential benefits, or there should be potential benefits of these helps, of these subsidies, they don't get it because they don't know that these helps, these economic subsidies exist. So imagine the amount of money that's lost because the people don't get it. If the people don't get these helps, these economic helps, their rights are going to be less covered. So I think it's very important that we as a public administration, we use all the technology in order to provide better public services. Because at the end of the day, it's not about technology, it's about delivering better public services, which is basically what we do, what City Hall, what the administration does. It's more or less, I always put this example, I always try to see who is in the audience, because otherwise I always put this example, is the way that Netflix sends us an email on Friday night according to what you've been watching. You might like to watch this TV show, but it should be the same with our public services. According to your profile, you should, or you might want to have this service that we have. This brings us to the idea of the digital rights and protecting the privacy and the non-intrusive. I think we are well covered. If you ask me, we are well covered with the GDPR, which gives us very, very short room in order to gather the data from our citizens, but that would be another issue. Anyway, we have launched a platform, a digital platform, Las Meves Ayudas, my helps, where all citizens in Barcelona can go into that website. They can introduce in an anonymous way their profile. I live with 2 children, my incomes are these ones, I've got elderly people at my church, or wherever, which are the helps that not only the City Hall, but also the autonomous government, the Generalitat de Catalunya, can give me. So in that sense, you can have a precise idea, and afterwards you can go and ask and demand to the social service or whatever department provides that help. That would be the first example. The other one, regarding to this non-discrimination, to this guaranteeing the digital rights, it's the use of drones, which is currently going on now, the use of drones in order to, I wouldn't say control, but have kind of a control on the use for the coast, for the beach in Barcelona. Barcelona's got 5 kilometers coast. There's a lot of people going down to the beach. No wonder why. And it's very important in order to preserve the sustainability of this coast. It's very important to control how many people is there at the same time. So we had in the past people that they were counting people going into the beach, and now we've got drones that they tell us on real time how many people is using a certain spot or certain beach in Barcelona. It was very important not only to use this technology in a more efficient way, but also to guarantee the privacy and to guarantee the rights on the people. In that way, the drones, they don't record, they don't tape, they don't get the images, they just capture the images, they send it through the vision computer to an AI system, which automatically tells us how many people are there in the beach. There's no, of course, facial recognition, or there's no taping on what's going on, only this information that we can also afterwards or at the same time provide to the citizens so they can know if the beach is very crowded or not, if they want to go to this certain beach to the other one. There was a little bit of controversy, I would say very, very small. We thought it was going to be more controversy on the media when we launched the tender. It's been going on since San Juan, since the 23rd of June. They're actually flying and giving us this information, and as long as we know there's not much intrusion in that sense. So I think it's quite a good example on how to use AI, but at the same time guaranteeing the digital rights.
Great. Thank you. Lydia, you want to add?
Yeah, I can, of course. I think related to the algorithm register, another example is are the procurement clauses we developed for artificial intelligence. And it promotes, first of all, the digital rights. Also, the first drafts have been thought or designed by members from the coalition. And to fill actually the register with information, we use a baseline data standard, which set the outline and which information needs to be in the register, which we have designed based on research with our target group, the citizens. But of course, there are also, you need that information, so that's why we designed those procurement clauses, to be able to be meaningful, transparent. And suppliers, when they sign it, they have to be transparent about the technical aspects, the procurement aspects, and about, they have to provide evidence if needed when one of the citizens or so on is actually just going back to the city and fighting against the decision. So,
great. Thank you. Well, that's interesting because actually procurement is precisely one of the many powers that cities have. One of the best and most effective ways of influencing policies. So looking into procurement, it's key. If you want to regulate, if you want to influence a particular field. So very important project here.
And I think it's interesting. We designed this template, and we actually encourage other citizens to use it as well to, on one hand, promote the use of AI, but at the same time also secure digital rights. I think the clauses show it is possible. And last May we launched, in collaboration with the European Commission, a new version. So we redrafted it. And now it's in line with the Concept AI Act, because before it was focused on the Dutch law. So.
That's important. So the power of collaboration, not only of procurement, but also of collaboration. And here I think the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights have much to say. Since we are an international relations think tank, we know that transnational cooperation is key. We know that through transnational cooperation there are many challenges that can be better addressed. So Milou, could you perhaps explain us a little bit what is the role of the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights here, how you're supporting your member cities in developing these projects, or the challenges associated with these collaborations happening between cities? Is everything as easy as Lydia just explained, sharing a template? We cannot hear you, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can. Now perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, it will be a bit difficult otherwise. Yeah, so as you mentioned, this collaboration part is quite vital in creating a good digital world, because it transcends beyond just our cities, as we well aware all together here. So yes, cities have different contexts, but kind of also face the same challenges. As you say, like cities have certain ways of promoting data rights-based city. They can make sure that the projects they do themselves, like Michael was highlighting, are data rights proof. So to know how many people are on the beach, but also provided safety and a trustworthiness to say nothing happens with these images, and we are just here to make life better, let's say, in Barcelona. And I would really want to be at that beach right now, what's in my head. But so like what you can do yourself, and like make sure as a city that your projects are data rights proof yourself, what you use. As Livia is highlighting with the procurement guidelines, and for that, cities can reuse these templates and reuse these tools. The AI registry is also an example of that. And then the third dimension is what you can stimulate like within your city, and how you can make sure that residents also get the skills to advocate for the digital rights in their own city. And I think the coalition is supporting cities on all three fronts. And then also to advocate for digital rights globally, to support city-to-city collaboration from city to city, and then also make sure that this local impact is achieved. So if we zoom in on the city-to-city collaboration, I can explain in 4 ways how we aim to do that. So since 2018, the coalition aims to support city members in the implementation of digital rights-based policy and advocacy on this topic, like I explained. So first, we have seen that it's already very effective to provide a safe and shared space for civil servants to exchange knowledge and to debate on ongoing challenges that they have. Each of us are working on challenges that we may recognize, like how do we provide a safe digital infrastructure, how do we make use of drones, how do we build an AI registry, to give some examples. And cities can learn fast based on the experience of others. So those safe places to debate and learn are very important. Once a month we have on one specific topic such a session where one city presents a best practice and then others can learn from it. But also the production of knowledge is very important in this regard. So the policy reports produced by the Global Observatory of Artificial Intelligence is also such an example that we produce this knowledge in collaboration based on case studies, because cities have a lot of examples to learn from and to get more generic lessons from. Then we also collaborate among cities to create possible solutions and tools, as given some examples of. So both of these examples were created in collaboration, as was highlighted. Other projects that we have done in the past are the Citizens' Voices for Digital Rights project, where 5 city members trained their citizens in the advocacy of digital rights, but also then moved those voices to the European Commission to reflect what are the concerns of cities and of residents. And then the Applied Digital Rights Initiative is also an example where, again, city challenges were matched to academic experts to counter those challenges that they may have. Then we also aim to support capacity building with local staff in cities. A recent example of how we try to do that is the digital rights governance framework in the help desk. So the governance framework outlines which foundations, structures, and tools cities could implement within their own local authorities to understand where they are in their digital rights journey and what they could do to further implement it. And I think it's very important to give practical guidance in how such broad principles could be implemented, and the help desk aims to further make that a practical exercise. So now the help desk, as well as the governance practice, is piloted in the cities of Dublin, Brussels, Sofia, and Tirana. And then, of course, the lessons that we learned there are shared broadly within the coalition of other cities. And then one final point would be that becoming a member of the coalition, it supports the political leadership of any city to also create local commitment to the principles that we hold and promote. And they feel supported by colleagues worldwide in this mission.
Okay.
So I think
great. I think we've covered all points. Great.
Yes.
So we are running a bit out of time. I would like to give the opportunity for you to ask some questions from the floor, but in the meantime, while you think which questions you would like to pose to our panelists today, I will ask our last question, but to think about interesting things you want to know. So in the atlas, we find a description of projects, we find categorization, right, in terms of topic, I just mentioned in terms of stage of implementation, but we don't find information on the challenges. Michael just mentioned before, when we launched that project on the drones, we were a bit unsure whether citizens, or how would they welcome this initiative. Perhaps you could think of challenges, of limitations that you encounter when you develop those projects, perhaps only fears that if we launch that, perhaps this will not be well understood. In 1 minute each.
Okay. I think in line with the two projects I mentioned, it's first of all finding a right definition of AI. Because we have a definition, but if it's too narrow, then we run the risk that certain algorithms are not included to be highlighted in the register. But is it too wide, then maybe all the statistic models will be in there as well. So that's one. Creating a governance around it and implement it, making sure that people feel the responsibility to contribute to it, making it part of the policy and the daily work life of people. That's pretty challenging. Because it starts, first of all, that people are aware of the fact that they are working and dealing with algorithms, which is not so straightforward for everyone as we might think, because we probably know all of it, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. So I think that are the main challenges for us.
Did you experience similar challenges, Michael, or?
Yeah, no, of course, we've got thousands of challenges and problems because, as I said, we just recently approached. It's good, we follow the example. We work a lot and we collaborate, and we follow the example of Amsterdam because they are quite a reference for us, Helsinki as well, so it's great in that sense. I'd say that we're facing many challenges or problems ahead. One of them that we are really struggling, and it's great, as I said before, we're working it with in the City Coalition framework with Helsinki and Amsterdam, is this algorithm register. The algorithm register itself is not really complicated, it's just a database and so on. But the thing is, how do we transfer the algorithm and the technology from the private companies? Whenever we buy we provide ourselves with a software, with an algorithm system in order to launch or provide or deploy public services. How do we do all these tasks of transparency, accountability, explanation, when we're talking about copyright, intellectual properties? I mean, all those algorithms that are going to be produced from our IT systems, of course, they are going to be totally open, but those from the private sector, whenever we get them, how are we going to manage? It's something that we are struggling at the moment. And the other one, it's more an organization problem, I'd say. The thing is that we are public administration, and it's very hard for us to get the IT profiles that they should be dealing with this technology. We haven't got data scientists, we haven't got IoT, blockchain experts. Whenever a student gets out from university, they've got 4 or 5 different companies that they are paying them over double or the salaries they're going to get in the public administration. And if they want to work for the City Hall, they have to go on for a 5 months or 4 months process, while they can choose wherever private company they want to go. So the thing is that we don't have the knowledge inside. We might be experts on public services, but we are not experts on AI. And that's something that doesn't really level us when we have to buy the technology. That's why we have launched, that's why we wrote this strategy in order to have some guarantees. So whenever we use this private software, at least we've got a framework where we can start trying to level the information and the knowledge the private has with the public sector.
Good. So, is there any question from the audience? Yes, Alex?
Hi. Do you hear me?
Yes.
So my name is Alexandra. I work at TIDOP at the Global Cities program on the digitalisation line. So I would like to know more about, well, Marta said, like, it's very important to have partnerships in this endeavor. So AI on the public sector should tag along with the private sector also, and like academia, to try and build this ethical deployment of AI in cities, right? So my question would be, we see the technology is mainly being developed in the private sector. So how can the public sector lead this innovation process without strangling the innovation in a way? And how can they build these bridges between the public and the private sector so that actually we can meet these ethical standards that are so important for like citizens in general?
Yeah, it's more or less related to what I was saying before. It's not easy. I mean, private, they've got their own interest, and the public sector have got their own interest. And then, as I said, the difference between the knowledge they have on all this new technology, emerging technology, regarding to the one we've got in the private sector, it's so different that it's hard to start a conversation. Although I think that the private companies are starting to have more concern on ethical and digital rights. I do believe that there's been kind of an evolution from these big companies, big telecom, tech and communication companies. In the last 10 years, there's been some huge scandals. I'm thinking about Cambridge Analytica, I'm thinking about all the leaks, I'm thinking about Uber the last week, or Cabify last week. So I think there's a little bit of a more sensibilization on these issues. But even though we're pretty far away, as I said, the different assets we have, they are not exactly the same. So this is something that we'll have to keep an eye on it, because as a public administration, we are the ones, maybe not the only ones, but one of the principal actors who have to guarantee the equality, the equality of opportunities, of rights. So when it comes to technology, and of course it's a very, very important driver in this century. We need to use all the potential on the technologies, but we need to use it balanced with our right, with our ethical dimension. So I don't know, I think it's a process that's still going, well, that's just starting, but I wouldn't say that's going on, it's just started. So I don't know, it's hard to me to tell you how it's going to go on the next couple of years.
Anything else you would like to
Yeah, I
add?
think in line with this, how the procurement classes were finalized, we organized round tables, which also includes suppliers at the table. And now with a new version of the draft, the European Commission also supports with setting up a community of practice. So also there's a platform again to invite other cities and suppliers. I assume everyone is interested to contribute and maybe find each other a bit more in the middle. So.
Okay, so is there any other word there? Yes? No? Okay, so with that, we put an end to this first segment of the session today. We are now going back home knowing a bit more about how to implement ethical artificial intelligence projects. Now let's move to a bit more of like a philosophical discussion around the relation between artificial intelligence and another very important principle, democracy. And with that, I hand on the word to Carme Colomina, who is also a fellow researcher here at CDOP and will moderate the following table. Thank you.
Bona tarda a tothom, buenas tardes. Nos queda alguien.
Good afternoon, welcome to you. I think that, I don't know who is scratching the microphone, but we still have an hour for our discussion. I don't know if it's going to be a debate because where will be the meeting points. Well, this last hour it's going to be more philosophical, but this is in the hands of our dear guests. Well, in reality, it's kind of a dilemma. Algorithmic democracy or democratize the algorithm.
Hay que cambiar mi micro.
We need to change mic, sorry.
¿Democracia algorítmica o democratizar el algoritmo? Mi primera pregunta.
So, my first question, is democratic the algorithmic logics? We're going to talk about it. Previously, we saw and we witnessed how algorithmic processes and how digitalization processes from this algorithmic organization that we are imposing towards our society, they have an impact on the social order and also have an impact in our possibilities as individuals. So how we are reshaping our society? Are we totally aware about this new model? Since we are digitalization, we have our new digitalization and the perspective of the world and how we see the world and how can we master these algorithmic processes, and mainly how can we reduce, if it's needed to reduce, the impact that the processes have on our society. These will be the two main topics. We have amongst us two experts on governance and digital gap. So, Karina Lopez, she is the director of the Digital Future Society think tank, together with Daniel Inirarity. Beyond many, many other things, he is also the director of AI, a chair at the European Institute in Florence. So all the previous ideas about the processes, democracy, now they are applied in our daily activity. So, thank you very much to the two of you, and we are going to start. Is it democratic, this algorithmic logic? This is a question for the two of you. I don't know if you want to start and to break the ice. You can go ahead if you wish. The first answer that I could give you, and from the ecosystem perspective that we have at digital system societies, maybe we are not giving too much value to the algorithm in itself. In the end, we are talking about a technology, but I think that the next part will be very important, and this is something that I always share with Daniel. The technology cannot be seen as some zeros and language programming. It has a social, economic, institutional context. Thus, if we do not start from this perspective, our technology assessment is going to be very difficult and to understand what we have in front of us. To me, the biggest challenge, and sorry, because it seems that my mic is not working very well. I'm really sorry. And it's not indeed. The first perspective, it is that we are not simplifying. What is the starting point when we talk about systems? And I'm going to share with you an example. We talk about the big corporations, the big tech corporations. The business model is not all the same amongst it's different, relying on the big corporation. Now, if we want to assess the algorithm behind these big corporations, we must understand what's the context What do we do? What's the economic model that really supports the system? Otherwise, we won't understand what's in front of us. We need to understand what's behind the curtains. This is what I really wanted to talk about. After these private spaces where many, many things are developed, and I don't know if your mic is ready.
Buenas tardes a todos. A la pregunta que hacías, yo lo primero que diría es, no lo sé.
Sorry, but we do not get sound in the translation booth.
Que van a
Now, yes. Anyway, the new political landscapes and decision-taking systems are more and more automatic, and a more integrated society and a bigger level of technology. It is very difficult to foster what is going to happen. So let's be ignorant from scratch. Secondly, I do have the feeling that with the internet and the AI and digitalization, you know, with all these subjects, we went from an euphoria, the Arab Springs, we talk about it in the previous years, we had a common work and article, and now the work internet right now really creates some problems and different issues, and in both cases, what do we have? It's kind of a fatal perspective, so it's a kind of a problematic issue, and many speeches do not talk about the new situation adaptation, and we need to rethink on how to get adapted and also how to exist. This is a new possibility, which is an absurdity, how to get adapted and how to resist and how to face and how we'll be able to reshape these new strategies. So first of all, if we talk about being democratic or not, I don't have any solution at all, but I do have a map. The issue would be, the key issue,
identifiquemos dentro de todo el
inside the political system, the issue is to know we have several stakeholders, we have the public administration, we have the public opinion, we have different actors. So let's see what parts can be automatized, can be set in different algorithms, and what would be the advantage, but also what would be the parts where the machines do not play a positive role. Beyond giving a broad answer to your question, I think that it is necessary to better tune this task. And the other thing that I'd like to share with you is that this euphoria and this definition really shows that we do not know at all how to assess this new situation. Needless to say that digitalization and automatization won't be the responsible for democracy, neither for good or for the bad. There is kind of a takeover initiative from digitalization and the role that digitalization plays in democracy. We thought that putting many digital devices, we will know the preferences, the tastes of citizenship, and we will be able to know on real-time citizens' opinion, and this would be great. Therefore, the existence of parliaments and MPs would be useless. But to me, it's kind of an easy task to justify, because machines and human beings, we reason in a very different manner. Well, I don't think that machines, they have the ability to have the reasoning process that we humans have. In this regard, if we make an assessment of the human mistakes, we have 10 mistakes, only 10 mistakes as human beings. We have the typical mistakes of human beings. But if we assess how machines are good or bad, well, we have a total, completely different perspective. Machines, they decide very well when they have binary problems, 1, 0. If then, the linear causality, when we have available data and when the relationship between an input and an output, it's a very clear relationship. However, human beings, we are doing very well, despite we are kind of clumsy, once we have to decide in an ambiguity situation, uncertainty, so we know how to smell, and we can take a quite relevant decisions in our daily life. And sometimes we take decisions without too much information and things went well. Yes, this is a comment that I wanted to share with you. I do have the feeling that inside this techno-optimism and this techno-euphoria and techno-pessimism, there is another stage, which is the techno-emotions, the feelings that I had during the pandemics. We had an uncertainty moment by the time it was needed from the public administration to render some guarantees that we were able to control and to master the situation. We had such a trend that tried to look for a technical solution and not to create more uncertainty. So we opt for technology to have a much more solid and much more stable safety feeling. And this is interrelated with another thing that you mentioned, and machines could make much better than we do as human beings. So how algorithms could contribute to reach much more democratic governance, if it's possible. We'll talk about it later. But this is the question just to create a relationship with your previous comments. Algorithms are very, very useful. My first idea would be the next one. We do need more algorithms. We need more technology. Today's problems, the biggest problems that we suffer as societies, won't be solved with less and worse technology. We do need much more technology, much better technology, improved technology. This is at a glance my first idea, so don't be scared towards technology. What happens is that technology, it is a social phenomena. It's not only a mechanical phenomena or a technological phenomena. Secondly, to me, technology, it's quite an interesting thing to better identify our tastes and preferences. So definitely we can know quite precisely and quite exactly what do people want once we analyze from algorithms mainly the behavior in the market, consumption, mobility. This is quite important for smart cities. We do have devices that will help us to better assess human behavior, but there are some things that cannot be controlled through algorithms because algorithms are based on data, and data belong to the past. We don't have future data, right? That's obvious. So algorithms are very conservative. Algorithms, I'm sure that you had this experience quite funny situation. Once you get in the internet offers some things that you already have. The internet offers you, I don't know, the Amazon algorithm. It is a kind of a continuous, stubborn algorithm that wants me to continuously read Habermas. I do know by heart Habermas. I don't want to read more Habermas. But, well, it would be great that the Amazon algorithm to make me read the opposite of Habermas. So I think that we need to develop much more this side of technology, this counterintuitive model. We do experience the trend to have a predictive analytics based only on our personal behavior. We should take into account that our society, the societies that answer to the demand and the interest, but also our societies should be societies able to innovate, that are able to alter and to change and to create new revolutions. With this regard, algorithms are quite conservative. Karina, please, you can react on that, but let me add on something, if you don't mind. We talk a lot about the digital gaps, right? But we are in a building that is going to work towards creating and to put an end to this digital gap when accessing training and education. But the appropriation processes of technology really create other gaps and other leaks, structural leaks. How AI will help us to reduce these gaps? First of all, we need to understand what do we have in front of us. This should be the main goal when we talk about gaps. What are the gaps we're talking about? If we talk about this building, there is a lack of connection. The connection gap, it is the most traditional one, the ones that came from the beginning of internet. Well, we had more users. As users of internet, we need to connect them towards these infrastructures. We were great. As for this society, we are aware about this speed. We are able to go from billions of users, but there is still 50% of the global population to get connected. So I think that we were kind of weak once we had a biased perspective. We wanted to understand what are we talking about, because we talk about the connection towards an infrastructure, into an infrastructure, but we didn't thought that it had to be a meaningful connection with a purpose. We do not need only the connection, the connectivity.
Por ejemplo, conexión, hay organismos y dentro de las
There are some elements and different positions in the United Nations that show that the goal will be connecting, and the others would say no. It makes sense because giga or being connected at this speed level won't change your life. So maybe you have a connection that will help you to make some video calls, and it really makes sense. Something different, it's that sometimes we feel that public speeches are lacking. Data poverty, this is something that I didn't. We have an issue with microphones, so I don't know what happens.
Otro reto que tenemos es el tema de la pobreza.
Another challenge that we have is data poverty. We didn't observe what's the data access, what kind of protection we do have, what are the data packages, how much we pay for data packages, because this will have an influence on the internet use. We talk about energy poverty. Do you have air condition? Can you pay to fight against heat 24 hours a day? But the same happens with data. And also we have an issue with devices, and we have other challenges, and we are running late, which is the critical mass. We invested so much, and no one would say that our children need to understand how language works and how grammar, the language, and how this will have an impact, right, on our mathematics, the role that mathematics play. We need a critical mass reading relationship with technology. Not just making children to get programming, but where the technology has an impact. That's what you said. We have a completely new context, but this new context is not only due to the fact that we have more digital technology. No, we do have technology that have an exponential growth ability that change utterly everything, utterly change the rules of the game in our society. Therefore, we are in some societies that, we created monsters. When we talk about Facebook, I'm sure that the social media that was created 2014, now it's managing and hiring content moderators, right? So this exponential growth, sometimes you start creating something and in the end you have something completely different, and you are tuning and has nothing to do with the initial purpose. So what tools, what do we have to face this exponential speed? Because in reality, what do we have right now? We don't have the ability to understand and to regulate and to manage and to assess and to analyze things. Things are going so fast. And today you are in a city context, right? In an urban context. This is a big challenge for urban and how to create this ethical AI. Big cities, big metropolitan areas, we will be the biggest beneficiaries, but also we will be the ones that will have a bigger impact on digitalization. And that's where the digital gap appears. We can talk about the gap between rural areas, city areas, the generational gaps, but the cumulative gaps effect, it's in the cities. The biggest effect of gaps can be placed and should be placed in cities. We talk about cities such as Barcelona and Amsterdam, but I'd like to tell you, just scratching the surface from the think tank digital societies, the big challenge is not only the city role, but also the metropolitan areas, because these cities would be the best and those that will be ready to face digitalization. Cities, they have know-how, they have economic resources, they have knowledge institutions. The problem is when you reach a metropolitan area. Before, we watch the interactive map, you have the diagonal area, and once you are far from diagonal, you lose connection. Not because you are out of the diagonal reach, the diagonal avenue and going upwards and downwards from diagonal street, you lose a connection. And the access, the right of access, it is important, right? But well, we are touching upon very, very important themes, but the most important element is, and the biggest challenge is, how are we going to understand what would be the new spaces, and how are we going to process everything? I think that one of the things, and many of the cities, and one of the elements that we need, it is to create these teams that will study the impact that the governance will play, the use of cities, also the management with the private sector, also the regulation of the private sector, everything that has to do with these exponential issues. We could talk about AI, but many other things. In 5 years, we will talk about the impact on how to regulate cryptos, and because you listen, many families telling my 18-year-olds are investing in crypto, and they are investing for more than 12 hours a day investing on cryptos. But society didn't reach this debate, and the moment will arrive.
It's about rethinking governance, how you can rule over that, but not only that, but to understand how to govern that, we need to understand the impact it's got on society. I agree. I'd rather say, what's that? What's that what we are discussing now? We are at this center, which I hope it will be very relevant when it comes to the digital divide or gap. There is also a gap that we could call, and not talking only about ourselves, it's a conceptual gap, the distance between the use of a given term and the meaning of such a term. And there has been a displacement, there has been a tectonical shift because of the implementation of such technologies. And by virtue of this, we don't really know what data are. People are now discussing data, but if you ask people, tell me what data mean, what are data in science? There is a great deal of transformation in science from the moment in which Anderson said you no longer need hypotheses based on big data, and he's telling that, and you can argue that it's totally arguable, but he's saying you have big data, we are not taking samples from reality. There is a science based on samples. I have a sample of reality. What happens if instead of samples you have n equals everything? So science would transform itself. Another example, which is rather related to what's relevant to me, what I find interesting. Democracy is democracy, the power, the kratos of demos, self-governance. So how can you make the half in small villages, in North American villages, studied by Tocqueville, or in my village in Navarra, you know, the way people decide on budgets. These things are changing, and these changes require us to think about what the decision-making process is. So what deciding means when machines take decisions. This will be even more and more in the future. So what are we talking about when we talk about self-determination? What kind of decision are we discussing? There is a great deal of work involved for many people. People can discuss this widely. And that's my question. The initial gap we see, it's the gap between old-fashioned concepts for realities that have exponentially changed. As a matter of fact, as we are rethinking all that, things will be changing, because if something defines this process is the speeding up, the acceleration mentioned by Karina. She even mentioned platforms and social media. Facebook today is doing something that it wouldn't do back in 2016. Even the role of social media has changed. She told the difference, our colleague. In the process, in this acceleration, there is this need of ordering and democratization of the process. So what's the impact of the fact that part of the digitization process depends on infrastructures and private interests? That's a question to both of you. I believe that, like anything related to technology, governments, generally speaking, governments are always late in the doing because technology progresses rapidly and the learning mechanism of technology is very quick, and the learning curve of politicians and policymakers, I don't want to categorize that. Or even if you think of the public administrations, I know that you are some of you are members of the public administration and you're good, doing a great job, you're good at this, but that's usually the exception. There are two different old-fashioned learning mechanisms, and there is another asymmetry in terms of knowledge. Those who are on Google and Facebook know more than the city councillor, even in a large city. First things first. And if you allow me, rather than answering your question, I will pose some issues and questions. Another issue or question is not related to the social structure, but the logic behind technology when we start talking about learning or learning technology or machine learning. The idea that control over the technological process is gone. I cannot control technology that has learned or used to learn. It's like trying to find again a free son. If he's free, he will be or she will be out of control. It's useless, but it depends how you educate it, the tools you use, how you watch over these or that person. So there is an interesting hypothesis from Edward Lee, from a Berkeley's teacher, co-evolution, and he's telling us that at the end of the day, the relationship between humans and machines should co-evolve based on a logic and rationale of co-evolution. He uses a brilliant metaphor. He's saying that people talk about controlling technology as if it were gods before Darwin. Darwin is not crashing the idea of creation. He's saying we cannot think of creation like the control by or the rule by a god. We have to make this compatible with the reality of evolution. So I would pose the same question, the next question. How can we rethink post-Darwinism co-evolution? So we should talk to technology so it performs properly. There are many speeches, official speeches, with good intentions, and they say in humans in the loop, more control, more supervision, more vigilance. So if that's the case, we should get rid of technology. But the issue is that we cannot ruin the performance of excellent technology. At the same time, we don't want to ruin a democratic society with the right values, a well-balanced society. And as I said, I was going to pose questions rather than answering questions. You can give some continuity. And as a matter of fact, what you're touching upon now, we've been working on that for a long time from the think tank. We are trying to understand the perspectives of design, use, and governance of technology, because traditionally, and over the last 15 years, it's been a linear evolution. It's design, it's use, and there is governance to try to mitigate the negative risks. We are always late in our doing. We always think of mitigating. We don't have time to think about the positive outcomes. So first and foremost, I don't think we are not paying the right attention to the design and the economic models of technology. And we were discussing that earlier, the part of design to understand what things are doing and how they work and how third parties can make the most of this technology for other purposes and not for the design purpose of such a technology. That's a topic. But how can we have an impact from a standpoint of cities? So I think we can have an impact when it comes to making sure that technology can redress things, can offset things. Technology can solve negative impacts. Many times we're lacking this part because we think that only through a regulatory model, a long regulatory model, and we need to remember that now there are 3,000 requests for such technology. Let's see when we get the EU regulation. We are forgetting about small-scale things. As a citizen, if I feel that I'm not having justice, I want to know how to manage a service properly. How can I access that? Whom to turn to? And that there is a given deadline that can be met. In some areas of knowledge, we have already regulated things. We have tackled those things. and contexts are different. But we should think, about the area of health, the healthcare area, accountability when it comes to the services provided and the impact things can have. Why are those services designed? And this idea has to be applied to other areas of technology. This law, this act, when they talk about the conformity assessment, there is accountability from vendors or from those providing the service or product to make sure that it will meet the expectation, that it was designed for a specific purpose, and it will be used for that purpose only, and there are some values or ethical responsibilities. And you also have a guarantee seal from the EU, and this applies to all the products developed in Europe, but also for products developed outside of Europe. Well, the implementation is a different story. So how can we have short-term solutions to develop this critical mass? That's the last part. We empower citizens, but we also empower other institutions. And we shouldn't forget, because we have a mouthful of regulations and data protection, and we know that the role is fine, but data protection agencies are not performing their role properly because they don't have enough resources, they don't have human or financial resources, and many other things. When they face challenges in Ireland, for example, and they detect that the data being used for reselling in the black market for marketing companies, and this data go to Germany, so the authority in Germany can act on it. There is an issue in Europe. We can develop regulations, but if there are no infrastructures at the national level with the right resources for implementation, then it's worthless. So they should also rethink how to improve those regulations and what we are lacking to complement this ecosystem as a whole. In some areas, I think that we are seeing and witnessing some uncertainty because of all these social changes, societal changes, but in some areas we can mitigate effects, or we can rethink how we work and how we mitigate those effects. Karina, it seems that we are doing everything wrong. The approach to technology in Europe is basically a regulatory approach. We are not leading in innovations. It would be more effective to be innovative and to get involved in the creation processes. But in the European Union, since we are not involved in the main development processes of such technologies, the EU tries to develop regulations, and the EU cannot even make these regulations be implemented. It cannot enforce them. When regulatory data agencies try to act, it's about political will as well. It's not about our capabilities. As a society, we have to lobby against politicians so we can claim for our rights. I don't think that doing things wrong, but we are not focusing energy on the right areas. We focus our energy on the wrong areas when it comes to technology. And today we have discussed public procurement. From the public sector, we can have an impact in many ways to generate things in the marketplace. And I think these tools haven't been properly used. For example, if you think of AI, we know how to create innovation creation processes in cities. There is a wave of startup hubs. All this part of the technological development or developments in smart cities. It's not that we have never had this or we have never faced the technological challenge. It was at a different scale, but we know how to have an impact. But I'm missing courageous examples of using this acquired knowledge and implementing it in a city. I'd like to see that a city such as Barcelona, and I'd like to convey and share this message with Barcelona, they should have a team of analysts for internal and external processes, about the impact of exponential technologies on those processes. How can we change public procurement to improve the use of AI, and how we can have an impact on the innovation market? How can we position ourselves before international institutions? There is this metropolitan governance. Now it's time for this metropolitan governance. If we want to reduce gaps, if we want to have a society that is not even more polarized, we have to act now. And now, I'm moving on to the dystopian part. I'm moving to the dystopian, and I'll give you the floor. I think the main challenge we are facing now when we talk about AI is that we cannot assume that as citizens, so we do not all appreciate the algorithm in the same way. And you were talking about dystopias, you were positivistic and technical. I think there is a 2018 survey from Ecotech about innovation, and there is a part that wasn't present in press releases. So how the different communities, socio-economical communities think about innovation. And the survey said that the lower your income, the more you distrust the innovation processes, the higher the distrust. And I kept that in my mind from the survey, because some communities in our society, they experience technology from a tyranny standpoint. I really recall this survey, and people were frightened of the obsolescence or the disappearance of employment of your job. So people were frightened about the impact of technology on them, on their job. You have the feeling that you will be replaced by a robot, by a machine. You get the feeling that you will be obsolete in the labor market. It's about, the building of dignity and decency in the Western society. And this part of technological dystopia that can be applied to some communities in our society, it's because people feel that they are under the tyranny of algorithm, precarious jobs. They have to look up for jobs on apps. They need to be connected 24/7. Everything is digitalized in public service. It's not a perception, it's a reality, indeed. If they want to request a loan, there is algorithm behind it, and they will reject, the algorithm will reject the loan because of their living conditions and where they live. Some layers in our society are now already under the tyranny of the algorithm. And we do not all feel the same pressure. And I think that's the main risk we are facing today in society. I wouldn't undervalue the strength of Europe in the face of the current technological age. We don't have any technological giant, but we have acquired knowledge. We have people, teams discussing all these matters. But I'm concerned because perhaps we can do things wrong. Perhaps we won't be strong enough to understand the changes we are facing, or we will do a wrong diagnosis. And I don't quite understand a few things. The transformation of the labor market that you mentioned, the perception of those people is right. I won't be replaced by an algorithm, but some people may think that they will be eventually replaced by an algorithm. We need to tell them about the difference between the labor market and tasks. Some tasks will be eventually automated, but jobs will not be replaced by machines or algorithms. Or in the GDPR. In the GDPR, the idea is that you cannot be a subject or individual of a decision that hasn't been supervised before. I think that's unrealistic, and it's not being applied. It cannot be applied. So these conceptual errors, we shouldn't make conceptual errors. There can be errors in the implementation if we don't have enough technological power. But conceptual errors we're proud of in Europe, we should make those conceptual errors we're so proud of. When we talk about privacy, we should consider that the laws and regulations on privacy have changed exponentially in the last years. We still think about privacy as private property, and it's not the case. It's not our reality. And my willingness to share my data will be based on my own opinion, and this will change the privacy of many people, of many individuals. If you think, of the genetics, if I share those data, this will have an impact on my family. We need to think about the shared property of data, and we are not entitled to do so because we have a different idea about privacy. We have to share some insights about that. to find common ground, and we need to be trusting in the Brussels effect. You know, we are discussing, we have an impact in protecting the privacy of people from Kansas in Texas. We need to rethink those mechanisms. We have to think about them. What's the impact of the whole technological process on the concept of public good? Is it changing it? Do you think that technology will end up being a shared public good if everything is digitalized? I think it's already a public good, and it's a state-owned public good. As Matsukato said, once many technologies originate in a state-owned initiative. But this is probably a space we have to revise based on the common goods and not based on private stuff or privacy. Even if it leads to some ambiguity and, you know, the tragedy of the common goods, of course, we can do things wrong when it comes to climate change and many other topics if we don't rethink them properly. That's true. We still went 15 minutes left. I don't know if there are some questions from the audience, but I'm sure there will be some questions from the audience. Feel free to ask. First and foremost, thank you so much. I think it's interesting what you are now saying. One of the main issues we are facing, we can hear you. One of the main issues we're facing in terms of privacy is that we see it as something individualistic, but at the end of the day, our individual privacy allows us to exert our democratic freedom. We need to have privacy to have some self-sufficiency and self-autonomy. So I like that comment. And there are some principles when it comes to the act on data protection. And some boundaries are disappearing because technologies are progressing so fast that we miss the goal of such regulations and such technologies. So do you think that these principles should evolve as well? Or if you think that the goal of those principles is still valid? For example, to give you an example, you know, the purpose limitation. Something is designed, if my data are collected by a video camera, this data shouldn't be used for a different purpose that for a purpose I'm not aware of, or a purpose that goes beyond my authorization or the control over that information. When it comes to boundaries, you know, changing boundaries, or if police can access other territories, or if things can be used for other purposes, the fact that this is passed by a law in Europe makes our data collected 3 years ago be used for different purposes, because the fact that we are missing the goal, this makes us lose control. And now the exception becomes the rule. Do you think that there is a need to stick to the principles of privacy rules and regulations, or do you think that we need to make progress and forget about the purpose limitation or similar aspects that are quite unrealistic? Sorry for such a long question. It's a good question, though. Your question is a very long question. Sorry about that. I could tackle many different issues and from different standpoints, but I'd like to share a few things with you. Before I was talking about the difference between human intelligence and AI. Some people question whether they say that AI is not that smart and not that artificial. The difference is that humans, we handle context properly. We have a contextual intelligence. We know that data find themselves in different contexts, and that's why we can tell a joke and we can understand it. Even if you're Catalan, you can understand a joke in a different language. I think that wasn't a funny joke, though. An irony, a joke, is, playing with words. It makes sense in a given context, and if I tell the joke in different contexts, it's nonsense. Humans can do that very well. But now, if you think of the data technology struggles with that. And one of the issues that we think about when it comes to the use of data that you mentioned is that most of the data we send out with our behavior, it's related to our behavior as consumers. But perhaps as a citizen, I like to convey other signals, other messages. In theory, that's very liberal. You purchase something, and public authorities just meet your expectations or your needs or your desires based on the mismatch between my behavior and what I say I want. Sometimes there is a mismatch. There is a clear example that I read recently about the environmental behavior. If we self-categorize ourselves in terms of climate change, we would score 1. And someone takes a look at my behavior, they would say 6 or 7. This means that we can have a behavior in a given context, and perhaps we want to change our behavior in different contexts. And the translation from data extracted from the marketplace, so to say, has its limitation. The translation is limited when it comes to the policy making. I don't expect governments to do what I really want, but rather what I'm saying I want. You didn't get it, did you? So the average level of demand of my government should rather meet what I'm saying and not so much what I'm doing. But if the government is a liberal conservative government and it's just meeting basic needs, they're just collecting a critical data, the government will meet the needs about what I'm doing and not about what I'm saying. And a different idea, it's not an idea, but rather a problem. We need to understand that, going back to the idea of eco-evolution, technologies can free themselves from their initial purpose easily. If you think of the mobile phone, there are thousands of examples in literature. And technology evolves in the hands of users. We used to have a design and modify technology based on users. And now there is the will of the designer, the will of the user, and there is the will of technology itself now. So now things get trickier. I'd like to make 2 remarks in terms of technologies. We think that these things are only happening today. The telegraph, the technology of the telegraph wasn't designed for that purpose, but to manage trains. We ended up using it in a different way. What I mean by that is that's the history of the innovation development, readapting and readjusting contexts. Your specific question about data is very complex, more complex than we think. So how can we handle users, and what kind of authorization are we giving when we give our consent about our data? Sometimes we are told that this will be sold, this will be used in a different context, but what happens with this consent in context, in hazardous context for your future well-being? You can think of menstruation apps and the abortion law in the States. So what happens? What tools can be used by the state to really know how many abortions took place? And I come from a country, when I was young, women would go to jail if they had an abortion. It's recent history. It's not old history. It's just recent history. Another thing is that sometimes we forget, when we are talking about data, something we forget about is that we are proxies. Those are data you don't own, but you're building those data. And the problem of these built realities is that, as you said, the difference between historical data, or you thought about the profile, and the human being. We're not matching the black and white profile. We don't accept this profile. And that's why the situation gets trickier. But rather than that, I also think that we have to rethink privacy. Restoring my privacy, so what are the tools I have to claim this right that it's often used when we talk about the web. For example, we have to apply this idea to other rights, such as the redressing right. We can, about information exchange about yourself, or the perception of others about ourselves. I don't know what's the solution, but we have to rethink that as well. As a citizen, as an individual, we also evolve over time. And I think I fully agree with this insight. I think our technological designs are really bad, even when we try to develop good designs. And he mentioned Ricardo, an expert who spent some time in a lab in Barcelona. He always gives the example of we will soon have a challenge related to deep learning or machine learning and the creation of new content in an automated manner. And he gives a easily understood example. It's about religious texts. When you test it with deep learning, a religious text, an Arabic text, has a content that is 10 times more aggressive than the Catholic one. And the Catholic one is 4 times more aggressive than a Buddhist text. And we're not talking about data only. We are talking about compilation of very complex data that you cannot say the machine is learning from this data and this bias is an issue. That's the issue. So we need to think about the challenges posed by exponential technologies. We are not witnessing them today, and we will need to manage them and handle them properly. 3 questions before we wrap up. There is a question at the front, and you'll be the next one. A very short one. I think it was a very rich discussion, and in the background, I think about the valorization of the political will. Daniel, you said that acting based on data, but not on total data, based on partial data. And this is complemented in political will with properly choosing rules, properly choosing the right option based on morality as well. And that's policy amazing. You can have data, but at the end of the day, you will have to take a decision based on your priorities in terms of policies. And this brings me to the second bullet point. Another fundamental idea is that it's not about having technology by replacement. It's because we are incapable of adapting to changes. So in this context, we need education. We need to change our skills. I need to weigh the way I work and I interact with the machine. I have to adjust to the machine to do your work properly. It's political action, educational action. It's about economic and financial action. If you think of the technological discussion, we miss the substance, which is the articulation of what's technological to other policies. That's just a comment and a remark I wanted to share with you. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. I came quite late, and I didn't want to contribute. I'm coming from Comisiones Obreras. It's a trade union, and I am expert in AI and the implementation of AI in the labor market. I don't know if you mentioned that topic, but I think you did talk about it when I arrived, and I'd like to share something with you. I'm surprised. I don't know if I'm even disappointed because you're too optimistic. Because you said that there won't be any human control over decisions. And from trade unions, we want to make sure that the decision-making process is based on humans. When it comes to the labor market, there should be always a human being involved in those decisions. In the States, you probably know that everything has been liberalized, and now things have been wrong, has been done wrong. There was so much wrongdoing in Europe, and we have a very European directive that is being negotiated that will pass next year. And one of the principles of this act and directive, it says that it should be fair, honest, and transparent, and there should be always human control. I was surprised, perhaps you can elaborate on that, because you say freely that this cannot be sustained, and I'm concerned about that. And to strengthen the idea shared by my colleague, the issue of data or shared data, I think it's dangerous to think that it's impossible to keep the privacy of something that identifies us, something such as democracy. Perhaps we can open for discussion, but that's only a comment I wanted to share with you. Another question at the front. I'd like to ask a dystopian question, a futuristic question. It's an open question, so perhaps you won't be able to answer this. I do see that we always think about technology as a challenge and as a threat against democracy, and I often think that it's not such a threat, but it changes the concept of democracy as we understand it today. Based on the first comment, I think the concept of privacy has changed exponentially between the previous generation and the current generation. What I think about privacy, it's not how my parents and grandparents saw privacy. They saw privacy in a very different way. We give out those data. The next generation will freely give out those data, or it seems so. And my question is the following. How do you think that technology will change the concept we have today about technology, about democracy? How will we perceive and understand democracy in the future? I can answer the question about the human decision-making process at the end. I can try to answer any question. The human in the loop, human beings in the loop of decision-making process. We're not saying that the human decision is not impossible. In September, we will launch a report on this topic because in academia, we haven't yet defined the human decision when it comes to AI systems. It's not clear. The EU directive says that it's at the end of the process, but there are many stages where humans get involved in digital systems. And at many stages, we influence the final decision of an algorithm, and different stakeholders contribute to the system. But the failure in the EU directive is that, we will only have an impact at the last stage. We say that it's impossible because we need to understand what's going on. The paper we are going to release in September, one of the use cases in the directive, there are different positions. And at some points, technology can present less biases because it will be rather binary in some contexts. So based on the same conditions, technology will always take the same decisions, but humans won't, given the same conditions. In some contexts, and now I will make a digression, and one of the contexts is boundaries. So based on the same circumstances or conditions, technology will always take the same decisions, but it's not the same when it comes to humans. We're talking about the same conditions, not when variables change. What I mean by that is that we have to analyze the context in which humans take decisions. And if it's always beneficial when humans take decisions, I think it should rather be a collaborative work. And when it comes to companies and businesses, this is applied to human resources. In history, there are some sectors and some contexts in which some communities and women were not represented. Humans are not always done things properly, and now digitalization is doing things wrong. But I think we have to be rather critical, but that's my humble opinion. I fully agree with you, Paul. It's good that you underline this issue. The issue of policymaking is a specific human activity, and partially can be replaced or totally replaced by the algorithmic administration. And the part that cannot be replaced is rather related to ambiguity, managing and handling uncertainty, such decisions. I think policymaking is, well, for example, for decisions, when all the mechanisms, deliberation mechanisms and algorithms have been launched, and we don't know yet what we are supposed to do. If you have experience in politics and you have talked to policymakers at any level, at some point in the process, some people may risk everything because, it's like doing things without knowing what's going to happen. This can happen at any stage and at many different levels. And the question of change, I think it's rather important. I was saying that algorithms are very conservative. And I'll give you an example that clarifies everything. I don't know if you have practiced the following exercise. Perhaps you will feel ashamed, but I encourage you to do it. You can access YouTube and you can look up sketches of Spanish comedians from 30 years ago, and you will faint, or you will pass out, not because of what they are saying, but because you could think, well, perhaps I would have laughed years ago. So we would laugh about macho and homophobic jokes, binary jokes about male chauvinist people male chauvinist people, and I would be entertained years ago. In a very short period of time, we found those jokes very funny, and we started to dislike them, and now we hate them. This is based on algorithm. No, it's not based on algorithm. That was the political will of governments, of the feministic struggle. That's political struggle. It's a decision. It's not the continuity of an algorithm. That's a very good example. The guy from the trade union, Comisiones Obreras, what's your name? Daniel? We have the same name. Some time ago, I was talking at the training school of Comisiones Obreras, your trade union. Joan invited me, and I think he wasn't that disappointed when I gave my talk at the training school, but I had more time back then. We shouldn't talk about replacement, people being replaced. I will try to be simplistic. In the current environment, there are two large fears, which are quite unrealistic, on the right-hand side and left-hand side, and they both use replacement. On the right-hand side, the right wing is talking about linguistic and ethnical replacement. In France, for example, they would talk about the replacement of the French people. There is a famous sociologist specialized in populations, and he showed some data, and he said, like, they are not battalions, they are groups of poor people coming on a boat, and they don't change the culture, they just assimilate the new culture. And on the left wing, the large dystopia is the labor replacement, and the labor replacement is unrealistic. Replacement is not realistic. There is a crisis. There will be a labor crisis. I'm sure about that, and very vulnerable people will pay for it. Now you get my point, right? I'm getting my point across with you. But there won't be replacement. We should rather talk about the transformation of labor market. There will be many wounds, but you won't lose your job and you won't be replaced by a machine. It's rather complicated. And when it comes to control, I agree with Karina. It's not about controlling or discontrolling. It's about thinking about it in a new category. Because sometimes we approach it from a binary standpoint, and we do it unconsciously. Algorithms are full of biases, and we think that we are not. Algorithms have some biases, but we also have biases. We are talking about the black box, the black boxes of algorithms. And what do you think about judges? What do they have in their minds? These TV shows, or the regulation of jail situations. They realized that these measures were insufficient. But judges, they also make mistakes. when they take decisions. So there shouldn't be this opposition. It's not about humans against machines. It's about how we can align everything, how we can find an alignment, correcting the good and the bad in all of us. Changing gear, your question, Alejandra. I will try to answer this question throughout my life, but I will try to give you a general answer. Lincoln, in his speech in Gettysburg, he said, democracy is the people's government, and we need a speech like the one in Gettysburg. We don't know what by, for, from means, and we don't quite understand what people mean, or peoples mean. As a French expert said, the introuvable peuple. It's something that you cannot easily manage. But without it, there is nothing we can do. So how can we build shared spaces in this world without boundaries? I had a metaphorical proposal that I wanted to make and put forward. We have to create a parliament for artifacts, a human parliament with human representatives, and algorithms need to have their own parliament. Machines need to parliament somehow. I think that there is a lot of work to do in this regard. I don't know if I will feel less or more concerned now about your presentations. I'm trying to calm people down. Asking a philosopher to calm people down, it's like asking a firefighter, you know, when they are fighting a fire, that they don't break anything. It's part of my profession. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas with all of us. It's been an intense afternoon. We moved from the local, from practical solutions in cities to these global challenges we were discussing now, the societal challenges we all face. So thank you so much to all of you for coming today.